Welcome to this explainer. I want you to think for a second about the actions you take every single day. The exact way you tie your shoes, that automatic route you drive to work without even thinking, or, and let's be honest here, that inescapable urge to check your phone the literal millisecond you feel a bit bored. We almost never stop to actually think about these routines. But beneath the surface, there's this fascinating, deeply ingrained neurological architecture that is quietly dictating our every move. So today, we're going to pull back the curtain and really dive into the deep psychology and science of our habits.
It's a question that haunts pretty much all of us, right? Why on earth do we repeat behaviors we know are bad for us? Whether it's just endlessly doom scrolling on social media, procrastinating on some massive project, or reaching for that junk food when we're stressed out. It's incredibly frustrating, and honestly, it often feels like a personal failure, like we just aren't trying hard enough. But I want to reframe that for you right now. Actually, scratch that. I need to reframe that for you. Repeating a bad habit is not a lack of willpower. It's not a moral flaw. It is simply the result of highly efficient automatic mental programming. Your brain is literally just doing exactly what it evolved to do.
So, what is a habit really? At its core, a habit is just a behavior repeated enough times to become an automatic, reliable solution to a recurring problem. You see, your conscious mind is kind of like the bottleneck of your brain. It can really only pay attention to one specific problem at a time. Because of this, your brain is constantly, frantically looking for ways to preserve your conscious attention for whatever task is most essential. By potting off daily tasks to the non-conscious mind, your brain creates this incredibly efficient energy-saving mechanism. By automating a solution to a problem you face all the time, your brain frees up serious mental capacity.
To really understand how this automation works, we have to travel all the way back to 1898. A psychologist named Edward Thorndike conducted this absolutely foundational experiment. He placed cats inside what he called a puzzle box. Now, the only way the cat could escape and get to a bowl of food outside was by performing one specific action, like pressing a little lever. At first, pure trial and error. The cats would sniff the corners, claw at the walls, just move around completely randomly. But eventually, they'd accidentally press that magical lever, the door would pop open, and boom, they'd escape.
But here is what is truly fascinating, the sheer speed of their neurological adaptation. Thorndike tracked these cats across dozens of trials. During those first 3 attempts, it took them an average of 1.5 minutes to escape. But after 20 to 30 trials, all those useless movements just faded away. The successful actions were reinforced, and the escape behavior became completely habitual. By the end, they could escape in an average of just 6.3 seconds. To put that into perspective, the brain entirely skipped the trial and error phase, creating a direct, hardwired mental rule. If placed in this box, press this lever, period.
From observing this incredibly rapid adaptation, Thorndike stated a fundamental rule of learning. He said, behaviors followed by satisfying consequences tend to be repeated. And of course, the inverse is also true. Behaviors that produce unpleasant consequences are far less likely to be repeated. This seemingly simple observation is absolutely crucial. It provides the perfect starting point for understanding how habits take root in our chaotic modern lives. Your brain is constantly exploring its environment, and when it stumbles upon a satisfying consequence, a reward is registered and a new habit begins to grow.
This rapid adaptation reveals a very specific 4-step timeline, and this timeline forms the backbone of literally every single habit you have. First, there's the cue. This is a piece of information that predicts a reward. The cue then triggers the craving, which is the actual motivational force behind the habit. Then comes the response, the thought or action you actually perform. And finally, the reward. That's the end goal that satisfies your craving and teaches your brain, hey, this action is worth repeating next time. Without all 4 of these components working together, a behavior simply will not survive.
Now, here is where things get really deep. We have to understand the true nature of cravings, because we usually get this totally wrong. Cravings are simply the desire to change an internal state. Let that sink in. You do not actually crave smoking a cigarette. You crave the feeling of relief it provides. You aren't motivated by the act of brushing your teeth, but by that fresh feeling of a clean mouth. You don't actually crave staring at your smartphone screen. You crave being entertained or maybe just distracted from feeling stressed. Every single craving is linked to a deep psychological desire to shift how you are feeling in that exact moment. And this 4-step process? It isn't just a straight line you cross once. It's a continuous, endless feedback loop. Think of your brain as a highly advanced reward detector. Every moment you are alive, even right now as you listen to this, your sensory nervous system is actively scanning your internal and external environment.
It's predicting what will happen next and monitoring which actions deliver pleasure or relieve pain. This cycle, cue, craving, response, reward, completes itself in a split second. It's silently updating your mental programming without you ever even consciously realizing it's happening.
So let's break this down to make it super actionable. We can essentially split these 4 steps into 2 distinct phases. First, the cue and the craving make up the problem phase. This is when psychological tension starts to build up. You notice something is wrong, or maybe you spot an opportunity for a reward and you realize something needs to change. The response and the reward, they make up the solution phase. This is where you actually take action to resolve that built-up tension and achieve the change you want. Basically, all human behavior is driven by this constant desire to solve a problem.
Let's look at how these phases play out in real life, because we all deal with this. Imagine your phone buzzes with a new text. That's the cue. The craving is that sudden urge to know what the message says. The tension is building, right? The response? You grab the phone and read it. The reward is satisfying that craving. And now, grabbing your phone is neurologically locked in with hearing that buzz. Or think about stress. The cue is feeling totally overwhelmed by a mountain of work emails. The craving is wanting to feel in control again. The response? Biting your nails. The reward is a temporary physical reduction in stress. This is your bottlenecked mind literally automating stress relief.
Okay, so now that we understand the invisible machinery behind our behavior, how do we actually hack it? If we want to design good habits, we need a practical framework. Enter the 4 laws of behavior change. Think of these laws as physical levers that control human behavior. To build a good habit, you have to ask yourself 4 things. How can I make the cue obvious? How can I make the craving attractive? How can I make the response easy? And how can I make the reward satisfying? When you push these 4 levers into the right positions, creating good habits becomes virtually effortless.
But what about breaking those bad habits we talked about earlier? The late-night junk food, the endless scrolling. To break a bad habit, we just invert the laws. You take those exact same levers and pull them in the complete opposite direction. You make the cue invisible, you make the craving unattractive, you make the response difficult, and you make the reward unsatisfying. By deeply understanding this loop, you stop being a passive victim of your automatic urges. You transform into the active architect of your own environment. It is a total game changer. Now, sometimes people push back on this level of behavioral design. They worry that having too much routine will somehow ruin the vibrancy and spontaneity of life, make things boring, right? But that is a complete myth. As the source material so profoundly puts it, habits do not restrict freedom, they create it. In reality, people who lack good habits are usually the ones struggling with the absolute least amount of freedom. Think about it. If you're always stressed about money, or your health, or constantly missing deadlines, you have zero mental space. Dialing in your basic habits frees up your cognitive load so you can actually experience real free thinking and creativity.
So, I'm going to leave you with this question to really ponder today. Look closely at your own daily routines. What is one problem phase, a specific cue and a craving, that you face every single day? And now that you understand the deep neuroscience behind it, how are you going to invert those laws to change your solution phase? Remember, every goal is doomed to fail if it goes against the grain of human nature. But once you finally understand the machinery of your own mind, you hold the power to completely reprogram it. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I highly encourage you to start observing your own habit loops today.